Hello, Lance Turner of ArkansasBusiness.com. This week on the website, we've started publishing a series talking to business executives about their projections for their businesses and their industries over the next 6 months amid COVID 19. We also thought it would be a good time to sit down with Dr. Michael Pakko, who is the chief economist and state economic forecaster at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock, about what he sees coming over the next few months amid the pandemic. So we talked to him about his new economic forecast for May, which just came out this week. We started by asking him about that. We also asked him about some other issues about the structure of Arkansas's economy and how that is helping the state as it faces this pandemic. We had a little bit of problem with Dr. Pakko's video in this interview, and so I've had to make some adjustments for that, but we appreciate Dr. Pakko for joining us, and this is our conversation. And it starts by saying the economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic continues to be more rapid and more severe than initially expected. What have you found, and how has the forecast changed since you originally put it out?
Well, the first forecast I put out was in late March, when we were really just beginning to see the direct impacts of the shutdown on the U.S. economy. And ever since, incoming information has just painted a bleaker picture of the outlook as we go along. And particularly the real high-frequency data that we're getting in is the initial claims for unemployment insurance, that just begin to go through the roof in the last couple of weeks of March and all throughout April. And that's really the basis that's driving at least the unemployment component of the forecast. But overall, the numbers as they come in slowly, as they trickle in, are indicating that it's a serious economic recession that we're in right now.
Now you're expecting, in terms of, I believe it's April unemployment, to be north of 12%, and that was a level that you hadn't expected to hit so early, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, the surprising thing about about this downturn is how rapidly it's taken hold. And I guess that's not to be expected. This is an unprecedented situation. It's different than other recessions we've had in the past, where there's often a constellation of reasons that the economy goes negative, and it's hard to pin it down on any particular thing. In this case, it's pretty clear what the cause of this downturn is, but that doesn't really help us very much when it comes to dealing with the consequences of it.
So it probably seems laughable now to ask you about the next 6 months. We've asked some of our business executives to try to think about the next 6 months. I know if you probably don't want to venture that far out, but what are the things you'll be looking at over the next 6 months in terms of certain trends and certain metrics that you'll be watching?
Well, as we move forward from this point, we're starting to enter this phase where we're trying to reopen the economy. But there are a couple of obstacles in the way. One is simply there's going to be continued vigilance on the part of households, consumers, businesses about the virus, and that's going to constrain economic activity regardless of what restrictions are in place or which businesses are open and to what extent. But we've also got the kind of the internal dynamics of the business cycle to contend with now. We're in an economic downturn. Thousands are unemployed. Incomes are suffering. People are having trouble making payments, and so we've got that dynamic going on as well. Over the next 6 months, I anticipate that the economy is going to continue to really slide further into recession. And really, we won't be looking at a recovery maybe toward the end of this year, I guess, when we've kind of bottomed out in the third quarter. And then it's going to be a slow process even going forward after that to get back to the kind of the full employment economy that we had before this all started.
The governor the other day talked about how Arkansas is sort of uniquely positioned, maybe apart from other states, in terms of weathering these kinds of downturns, and sort of sounded some of those same notes in terms of, well, number one, we didn't shut down completely, but then number two, we've got a diverse economy. How is that playing out in terms of Arkansas's ability to weather this unprecedented downturn?
if we look sector by sector at the job declines and kind of add that up for Arkansas, it's not quite as severe in percentage terms as the national report was. And that's because our employment is concentrated less in industries that are really at risk of the COVID-19 shutdown effects and all that, and more dependent on goods production and manufacturing that hasn't been quite as hard hit in terms of employment. So already the structure of the economy buffers us a little bit from some of the most severe effects that we're seeing in other parts of the country. And the fact that we are smoothly transitioning back to some form of new normal, I think will also serve us well as we slowly go through the recovery process.
Were there any surprises in looking at those industries that were the hardest hit? I mean, I would, obviously restaurants, hospitality were pretty badly affected. Were there any others that surprised you in terms of how they took a hit?
Well, it's interesting that the restaurants in particular, or food service in general, is one category where my forecast has actually improved a little bit since last month. And it's because we've seen really a lot of resilience in the food services sector, being able to have takeout, curbside service, drive-throughs, really more activity there than we really anticipated was going to be able to take place. On the other side of things, the surprising aspect of what we're looking at in the job losses, at least nationwide, is the fact that they're across the board. It's the job losses are not concentrated in just those industries that are more at risk for social distancing impact, but really a contraction of overall economic activity, and that spreads to manufacturing, even healthcare. That surprised me at first, but considering the fact that we're basically canceling all non-essential surgery and shutting down dentist offices and things like that, even healthcare is taking a big hit when it comes to jobs. So it's really, the reason and the focus for this recession is clear. It's really spread across the economy at this point.
What's the one thing maybe you wish businesses kind of knew about economic conditions now, in terms of how you see them at this moment? Is there a point here that everybody's missing, or what would you like to share in that regard?
Well, I think in some quarters there is a sense of optimism that I don't necessarily share, that we can emerge from this with a sharp V-shaped recovery, for instance, that all we have to do is lift the restrictions on the economy and everything will go back to normal. And I think it's unrealistic to think that that's going to be the case for both behavioral and simply data reasons. This is going to take some time to play out. But I think people are beginning to realize that. It's even, surprised those of us who track economic figures day in and day out. Some of the magnitudes and the speed with which things are changing has just been so surprising that we're all kind of running to keep up with understanding the situation.
Dr. Michael Pakko, the chief economist at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock, thank you for joining us, and we appreciate your time.
Well, thank you for inviting me.